Are you a digital nomad or expat looking for tips on how to make a financial plan for your next move? As someone who's lived in 3 different countries and has gone through this process numerous times, I'm going to talk about my top tips in this video. So let's get right into it. Hey guys, it's Johnny. Getting the chance to be an expat or a digital nomad or someone who moves abroad for work or study is a fantastic opportunity. Obviously, there's a lot of planning that goes into these kind of moves, both from an administrative perspective, both from a logistics perspective, but also from a financial perspective. But this is nevertheless an area that I think often gets overlooked by a lot of people. And by overlooking your finances, you can easily create additional stress to yourself, and it can put a damper on that positive experience that you really want to have. To prevent that from happening and to help you create some kind of financial plan that gives you some boundaries and freedom at the same time to do what it is that you want to be able to do while you're traveling, I'm going to share with you my 4 top tips that I've learned from moving between UK, France, and Spain. So my first top tip is something that I'm sure you'll have already done from numerous perspectives about the lifestyle and the culture, but you maybe haven't done it from a financial perspective in depth, which is to research your destination. What I'm talking about more so here is the cost of living, and if applicable as well, say for example, you're going to be employed by a local business, then do research as well, wages and salaries. And I researched the cost of living for a place out of curiosity or for my own trip or even to make videos on this channel. A site I go to is numbeo.com. On Numbeo, based on people's input, you can see what the average cost is for various areas of life. You can also compare it with other cities and even countries as well if you want to. It's important to say that Numbeo shouldn't be your only source, nor would I use it as like a gold standard. I would use it as an initial reference, and then I would go do some more research, look at blogs from other travelers, for example, or even look up local businesses, telecom providers, energy companies, etc., and see what their tariffs are, what their prices are on their website. So by doing this, you have an initial idea of what the cost of living will be, and you also have some kind of reference as to how much or how less it's going to cost you compared to your current living situation. Now, tip number 2 is something that I believe everybody should be doing anyways, but even more so in this case, is to come up with a budget, but not just any old budget. This budget should be realistic, and it should also be destination specific. And when I say that, I'm talking about factoring in things like the timing of pay slips, different taxes that you might have to pay, and the means by which you have to pay them, and any other nuances that might come into play, such as the timing of paying bills, if you pay bills on a monthly basis, if it's a quarterly bill, for example. I'm talking here as well about being very specific by category, at least having a good estimate per category, but making sure that you don't miss anything out. You know, the amount that you budget, it doesn't have to be right on the money. Maybe give yourself a little bit of buffer in case it's a bit more than you really expect to pay, but making sure that every category where you expect to have expenses has some kind of budget. Beyond all of that though, the most important thing is that after you've done your research on your destination and you have an idea of what the cost of living is like, that you use that information to determine what kind of lifestyle you can realistically afford to live. Now, if you're currently living in the United States or Northern Europe, there are a lot of countries around the world where you could have a similar quality of life, or possibly even better, for a much lower financial outlay. But at the same time, it is important that you do stay grounded with your budget, that you be realistic with it, and that you don't get too carried away by additional luxuries that you may be able to afford thanks to that lower cost of living. Tip 3, again, something I believe everybody should be doing, but this is essential in the case of, you know, digital nomads or expats moving abroad, is to have an emergency fund. Trust me, having lived in multiple countries, it's not a question of if things go wrong, it's when things go wrong. Things go wrong, inevitably. It might be a particular administrative procedure that you didn't foresee, it might be a fine, it might be that you get lost somewhere, it might be that you end up in an emergency situation and you need cash. You are going to need some kind of money to get you out of the hole when those situations arise. So as a result, have a good amount of cash available to you to be able to access when you need it. You know, a standard emergency fund, a lot of people talk about 3 to 6 months. Depending on your situation, depending on your income, you know, you might want to increase that to 6 months plus. The important thing is that you have access to that cash when you need it. What you need to keep in mind as well is that if you do dip into your emergency fund, have a number of that emergency fund, which is the lowest acceptable point at which you'll consider staying in your destination. So for example, if I have a $6,000 emergency fund and I deplete to $2,000, it might be the point where I start thinking, okay, can I sustain living where I am right now? Should I go home? Should I move to somewhere else? Essentially, what is the number on my emergency fund where I deploy a contingency plan? So with the first 3 tips, you should now have a solid financial foundation for your adventure. The important point now is number 4, which is to make sure you keep track of that budget, you review it regularly, and you stick to it. Because as with anything, particularly in the world today, things can change quickly, whether it's your income situation, whether it's the cost of living in a place. Maybe you're living in a country with high inflation and costs are changing very, very rapidly. So you need to stay on top of that. You need to know what's going on, and you need to be able to monitor if your financial situation in the country where you're living is sustainable and you can continue living there. But at the same time, you also need to be tracking and making sure that you're meeting your financial obligations and that you do have a bit of money to allow yourself to have fun, which is what a budget allows you to do as well. Hopefully in designing your budget, you realize you have enough to cover your basic living expenses and you do have some money left over to spend on, going out and enjoying life in the country where you're living, which is how it should be and will help you have the most enjoyable experience when you're there. I hope you enjoyed this video and found those top tips helpful, guys. Leave a comment and let me know, is there anything else you would add to this list, and what are your top tips that you've learned from traveling or moving and living abroad? The next time, I'll see you on the next one, and let's get this money.